three main social forces which had a large impact on the educational system that can be traced back to the early 20th century are immigration, urbanization, and the transition from a largely agricultural market into a more industrialized market. And so when we look at the early 20th century, what we need to understand is this was really the end of the frontier era, where it was less about learning how to homestead and make a living on your own land. And this was really a time of what was perceived as opportunity. And so things like railroads and telephone lines really brought people closer together. And this led to really the growing urbanization where people could take the railroad and go to their local station and you could find yourself in a city like New York or even in the later days somewhere like San Francisco out west. With the rise of immigration, actually during this time there was a lowered declining birth rates, and the population was, as America tends to be, largely immigrant. And a lot of these immigrants were also looking for the opportunity, and they saw opportunity within the cities. And so what this meant is America was going through a transition from what had largely been an agricultural market into one of the biggest manufacturing industries in the whole world. In fact, after World War II, we had the largest industrialized nation. And so this was really a time of transition. And we can look today and find many similarities in that largely industrialized base is now turning into more information technology. And so the implications on the Rust Belt have been drastic. And still to this day, we are far outpacing our immigration quotas, and people are still searching for better lives within the cities. And so we do see a lot of similarities in the spirit of the age, really, in living in an urbanized environment and really moving on to the next industry. And we're in this stage of, it's a transition, right? And so we're not really sure what's going to happen to all these people with manufacturing jobs or CDL or generalized like semi-drivers. They're really in a state of, well, are they going to be replaced by information technology, right? And so when we look at what happened in the early part of the 20th century, we may be looking into what happens into our own future. And so what is important to understand is the early 20th century, even though there was a lot of desire to pursue opportunities, some of those opportunities really weren't what was expected. And so what you had in these cities were what were called robber barons, and these were essentially the CEOs or owners of companies who were really greedy and would take advantage of their employees. And so this really led to the antitrust acts and eventually the progressive era as a whole, which started as a movement to protect women and children in the labor force. However, the progressive movement really continued and now stands for the rights of all marginalized communities. And so from this early progressive era, we got the large labor unions, which can still be seen today in teachers' unions and do play a big part in protecting us teachers. And another shift that occurred during this time was the schools got much larger. In fact, at about 1900, there were over 130,000 different school districts. By 2000, almost 90% of those were gone, and there were only about 15,000. And so, in order to protect students, there was really a professionalization of teaching with a multitude of standards and achievement tests to earn a credential. And from this, what we have today are things like No Child Left Behind, which are government acts that dictate how schools are to be held accountable for a certain level of student success. Now, No Child Left Behind did have some issues in that it would punish the worst performing schools, thus they would perform worse and would kind of continue this cycle of marginalization. However, No Child Left Behind has led to the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is really trying to make life better for students who may not have found success in the past, especially as they are being pushed into larger and larger schools. And then the early 20th century also gave rise to child-centered education. Back then, of course, John Dewey was an early proponent of this, and we can see the legacy of his work in something like the universal design for learning, which is a very popular learning theory that is used today.